Almost 40 years after the Chernobyl disaster, one of the worst nuclear catastrophes in history, a Russian drone strike hit the shelter covering destroyed reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The construction was significantly damaged following the explosion, causing a fire which was quickly extinguished. Radiation levels remain stable and are being closely monitored. Explosions coming from the new safe confinement were confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Agency team working at Chernobyl, who heard them at around 1:50 a.m. President Zelenskyy stated, "Ukraine built this shelter together with Europe, the US, and other nations that truly value global security. The only country in the world that would attack such a site, occupy nuclear plants, and wage war with no regard for consequences is today's Russia." The new safe confinement was engineered to contain radiation leaks from the Chernobyl NPP. Standing 109 meters tall and stretching 257 meters in length, makes it the largest movable metal structure in the world. The project involved workers and specialists from 27 countries. In November 2016, it took 2 weeks to slide the colossal steel structure into place. The NSC covers the deteriorating concrete sarcophagus built over reactor number 4, the site of the April 1986 explosion that released massive amounts of radiation across Europe. It would take 100,000 peacekeepers to maintain stability between Ukraine and Russia. This was reported by President Zelenskyy on Thursday during a visit to the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant. While talking with journalists, he underlined that Ukraine military officials have already mapped out a deployment plan for allies. Zelenskyy also stated that Ukraine would not accept any bilateral agreements on its fate reached by Moscow and Washington in its absence.
It's important that everything does not go according to Putin's plan, in which he wants to do everything to make his negotiations bilateral, between him and the United States of America. We, as a sovereign country, simply will not be able to accept any agreements without us. I believe that Europeans must be at the table for talks because we are part of Europe, and we will certainly be a member of the European Union.
The overnight attack on the fourth reactor shelter at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is a clear sign from Putin and the Russian Federation. According to President Zelenskyy, who spoke with journalists at the Munich Security Conference, the Kremlin leader is not seeking peace.
The drone was flying at an altitude of 85 meters, and I think it's important to understand that radars cannot see this height. There will be an investigation, but this gives us the opportunity to say today that if the radars cannot see at this height, they did it on purpose. This doesn't mean that somehow the drone changed direction, etc. Everything happens in times of war, but it is important that it was flying at such an altitude that the radars could not see it, and the strike was on the sarcophagus. And in fact, on the day the Munich Security Conference started, it hit this most dangerous object in Europe.
Ukraine would be involved in the peace talks with Russia, stated President Trump. While talking with journalists in the Oval Office, he reported that there will be a lot of people involved in the process.
We would have Ukraine, we would have Russia, and we'll have other people involved too. A lot of people, a lot of forks in the a lot of forks in this game. I'll tell you what, this is a very interesting situation, but the Ukraine war has to end.
Russia continues to deepen its military ties with North Korea, while Moscow is asking for another 2,000 to 3,000 DPRK troops to be transferred to the Kursk direction. This was stated by President Zelenskyy in Munich. He suggested that Russia's mounting losses have forced it to seek foreign manpower.
We can only confirm their presence once they arrive on the battlefield. But we already see them requesting additional reinforcements, and that is not a sign of strength.
According to Zelenskyy, more than 4,000 North Korean troops have already been eliminated, with approximately 2/3 of them dead. During the same press conference, the Ukrainian president stated that this year Russia will prepare 15 divisions, which is at least 100,000 personnel, to train and possibly deploy in the direction of Belarus.
We think that all of them will be in Belarus, or partially. It will be, 150,000 people. It's just a big group. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but they could go to Ukraine just like they did in 2022. Or they can go to Poland or the Baltic countries. And I think this is his idea. And I think he's preparing for a war against NATO countries next year.
Russians are conducting enhanced military registration and forcibly mobilizing men in temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories. This was reported by Ukrainian Defense Intelligence representative Andriy Chernyak. Commenting on the issue to the Ukrainian Rutte channel, he mentioned that Moscow troops go to schools and enterprises to try and recruit as many military-aged males as possible. At the same time, Chernyak underlined that despite Russia having large mobilization resources, they forced Ukrainians from temporarily occupied territories to fight in Russia's war. Meanwhile, just a few days ago, the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, Artem Lysogor, reported that Russians are encouraging 9th graders to sign contracts with the Russian army after graduating from school. This is happening in the temporarily occupied city of Seversko-Donetsk. Lysogor stated that representatives of Russia's enlistment offices meet 14 to 15-year-old students during career guidance activities organized by the occupation administration. He also noted that new legislation from Moscow allows youth to bypass conscription and immediately sign a contract, after which they will be sent to the front line. European countries have to come up with concrete plans for Ukraine if they want to take part in a peace deal, believes the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Ahead of the Munich Security Conference, he once again underlined that Ukraine has to be in a position of strength.
I really believe what Europeans have to do now is to come up with the concrete plans. One, to get more military aid into Ukraine. Secondly, to get more training into Ukraine. I know that many initiatives are being thought through, are really already brought on board. But also to think through that whenever the peace deal is done, how European countries, probably together with others, but how the European countries can help there. So create the facts on the ground, create the facts in terms of the plans you are making, and that is the best way to get your part at a table.
World leaders are gathered for the 61st Munich Security Conference, which started on Friday in Germany. This high-level event will last till February 16. The conference is assembling more than 450 senior decision-makers and leaders from around the world to discuss key foreign and security policy challenges. Russia's war against Ukraine is the main topic of the meeting this year.
The end of this war is what we all hope for. How this war concludes will have a lasting impact on our security order and also on the influence of both Europe and the United States in the world. I firmly believe that simply making a deal and leaving would weaken us, Ukraine and Europe, but also the US. And for this very reason, every scenario, before or after the end of fighting, we declare our combined power of deterrence and strength. That is why, in every scenario, support for Ukraine must continue, namely from Europe and the US.
And let me be very clear. A failed Ukraine would weaken Europe, but it would also weaken the United States.
The Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine. And we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense.
The Ukrainian delegation in Munich is led by President Zelenskyy. During the event, he will meet the senior officials of the new Trump administration.
I think what is very important, the meeting, not to make any decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. This is principal position we will never accept it. And when I said that we will never accept, I'm not speaking just about me. I'm speaking about all our people, all our nation. I don't want to, be those person in the history who helped Putin to occupy my country. I don't want it. And that's why I will never do it. I will never do it. And it's very important for me to pressure Putin.
Russian officials won't be taking part in the Munich Security Conference as they had not been invited, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova told reporters. However, this is contrary to a statement by President Trump that American officials could engage with Russian and Ukrainian representatives at the event. The Ukrainian government confirmed on Thursday that no direct talks with Russia were planned in Munich. Moreover, any future discussions with Russia must be first coordinated with the US and European partners, stated the Ukrainian presidential advisor Dmytro Litvin.
I will meet with Russians, with only one Russian guy, with Putin, only after we will have common plan with Trump, Europe, and we will sit with Putin and stop the war Only in this case I'm ready to meet, not in other compromises platforms.